The first thing I heard after the handcuffs clicked shut was applause. Not from everyone. Just enough people in my building to make the sound worse. A few sharp claps. A couple relieved laughs. The rustle of phones being lifted higher, so nobody would miss the moment the rich woman from 11 finally got what was coming to her. My downstairs neighbor was standing 10 feet away with blood on his father's name and righteousness all over his face. His wife was crying. His kid was terrified. The police had my license plate, my car, a bloodstain on my bumper, a DNA match from the victim, and dashcam footage that showed a Porsche exactly like mine running a red light and throwing an old man into the crosswalk hard enough to make the crowd in the video scream. For about 5 seconds, even I stopped trusting my own life. That was the most frightening part. Not being accused. Not the handcuffs. Not even the video. It was the tiny, cold moment when the evidence was so complete that my own certainty started to feel arrogant. Officer Medina opened the rear door of the patrol car and said, in that patient tone police use when they think you are done being useful, "Miss Hart, step in." I did not move. Not because I was brave. Because the video was still playing on the phone in his hand, and something inside it had just needled the back of my brain so hard I couldn't let go. "Play it again," I said. John Fallon barked a laugh from behind him. Unbelievable. She still thinks she can talk her way out of this. I ignored him. "Officer," I said, staring at the screen. "Play it again from the garage." Medina looked tired. Irritated. Almost sorry. "That won't change the DNA." "No," I said. "But it may change who drove the car." That shut people up. Only for a second. Then the noise came back all at once. Not argument. Worse. Excitement. The hot animal energy people get when a story they thought was over suddenly offers a second ending. John stepped forward immediately, sensing the room slipping from him for the first time all night. "She's stalling. Don't let her do this. You saw it. Everyone saw it." He was right. Everyone had seen it. That was the problem. People love evidence when it confirms who they already wanted to blame. Officer Medina held the phone a little higher. The video rewound. My car sat in darkness for one beat. Then the engine came alive. The garage lane brightened. The front wheels turned. The Porsche rolled forward. I watched the wall behind it. Not the windshield. Not the driver. The wall. Then I smiled. Small. Cold. Enough to make 3 of my neighbors go silent. Officer Medina noticed. "What?" I lifted my cuffed hands as much as I could. "That's not my exit." For the first time all night, John Fallon looked confused instead of furious. I would come back to that moment later and realize it was the first crack in the whole structure. Because when people improvise a frame-up, they spend all their time on guilt and not enough on habit. And the truth, most of the time, lives in habits. The building I live in is called Mercer on Ash, which sounds more expensive than it actually is. 12 floors, steel and glass exterior, aggressively tasteful lobby, the kind of place with a scent machine by the elevators and constant arguments in the group chat about storage lockers, guest parking, and whether dogs should be allowed on the rooftop terrace. It is not luxury. It is proximity to luxury, which is a very different atmosphere. That matters. Because buildings like Mercer are full of people who can almost afford the lives they want. And almost is one of the most dangerous emotional climates in America. It makes people observant in ugly ways. They notice shoes, cars, grocery bags, accent marks and names. Which units got renovated? Which ones were inherited? Who tips? Who never joins the wine nights? Who says hello warmly? Who says hello like they have somewhere better to be? To Mercer, I was the woman in 11C with the Porsche she never drove. That was enough information for people to manufacture the rest. My father had left me the condo and the car when he died 2 years earlier. The condo was simple enough to understand. The car confused people mostly because they insisted on understanding it incorrectly. The Porsche Panamera was graphite gray, expensive enough to attract commentary, and low enough to the ground that people projected personality onto it the way lonely people project intention onto pets. To the building, it meant I was flashy, cold, probably arrogant, probably overpaid, definitely not struggling, and therefore morally available for contempt the second any story needed a villain with heated seats. What it really meant was that my father had loved machines more honestly than he had loved most human beings. And when cancer narrowed his world down to morphine, memory, and the garage, he made me promise I wouldn't sell the one thing that had made him feel young after my mother died. So I didn't. I kept it serviced, covered, insured, detailed twice a year, and untouched. Because I have never had a driver's license in my life. That part usually surprises people for exactly 3 seconds, then they start trying to outthink a medical file. I was diagnosed at 16 with severe red-green deficiency and poor low-light contrast response. In ordinary life, it means I function normally most of the time. I work. I travel. I read spreadsheets that would make healthier people cry. But in fast visual environments, traffic signals at dusk, wet roads, headlight spill, split-second decision points, my margin for error is large enough that the DMV stopped pretending I would ever belong behind a wheel. I took the exams. I failed them. I took the adaptive screenings. I failed those too. By 22, the state and I had reached a very mature agreement that I would remain a passenger until death or teleportation solved the problem for both of us. I did not mind. I built a perfectly good life without driving. I work in risk consulting, which is the least sexy way to say that I spend my days helping wealthy families and closely held businesses understand exactly how exposed they are before reality explains it less politely. My clients are the kind of people who claim to value blunt advice as long as it sounds like strategy and not judgment. I work remote most days, keep unnatural hours when Asia calls, and have enough money to live comfortably, dress well, and offend strangers just by existing near a premium parking space. I am not especially social in buildings. That too had become part of my legend. Not rude. Just private. I don't join lobby gossip. I don't attend mixer nights. I don't pretend package room small talk is community. I tip staff well. I say thank you. I keep my life inside my unit. For some people, privacy is neutral. For others, privacy is an accusation. John Fallon lived in 10C directly beneath me with his wife Elena, their son Milo, and his father Arthur. If you met John once in the lobby, you might have liked him. He had the overstimulated warmth of a man who makes himself useful everywhere, because he wants to be needed and noticed in equal measure. He held doors too dramatically, knew everybody's dog's name, complained with intimacy, helped carry packages no one had asked him to touch. He was always 2 months away from some big professional rebound that never quite materialized. He also took occasional building work when management needed extra hands. Contractor coordination, delivery oversight, storm cleanup, lockout help, temporary maintenance access after system failures. Just enough proximity to control to make him feel bigger than his paychecks allowed. Arthur Fallon, his father, was different. Thin, soft-spoken, careful with his steps after a minor stroke the year before. He always smelled faintly of peppermint and pharmacy soap. We rode the elevator together sometimes. He once asked what exactly I did upstairs all day, and when I explained, he nodded solemnly and said, "So you're professionally suspicious." I liked him immediately. Elena moved through the building like a person trying not to spill herself. Grocery bags on both wrists, child on one hip. Apology already on her face before she needed one. For a long time, I mistook that for weakness. It wasn't. It was what people look like after living beside someone else's urgency for too long. 3 months before the night John tried to put my life through a shredder, a winter pipe burst 2 floors up and sent water through part of the building. It leaked into his utility space, seeped through shared walls, and triggered a panic about electrical access in my stacked laundry cabinet while I was in Boston for work. Greg, our property manager, called me in a frenzy. I gave him a temporary override code to my smart lock. John was on speaker when I did it because he was helping with the damage response. That was the first mistake that mattered. The second was simpler. I never deleted the temporary code afterward. If you want to know how intelligent women get framed, start there. Not with foolishness. With one small act of trust left in the system longer than it should have been. The night it all happened, I had been on a live call with a Singapore client from 6:02 to 6:57 p.m., discussing cross-border exposure on a family office portfolio that had become suddenly terrified of its own real estate leverage. I remember this clearly because the principal's son kept interrupting to prove he had read 3 articles about macro volatility, and believed this now made him an economist. At 7:14, I heated soup. At 8:03, I answered 2 work emails and ignored 4 texts from Lila, my assistant, because none of them looked fatal. At 9:10 I showered. At 10:40, I got into bed with a novel I was too tired to process. At 3:11 in the morning, my front door exploded inward so hard the frame cracked. Not a knock. Not pounding. A body hit. I was awake instantly, heart trying to leave my throat, brain offering a carousel of disasters. Fire, break-in, gas leak, death in the family, before John Fallon's voice tore through the wood. Open the door. By the time I got there, he was slamming a shoulder into it between kicks and shouts. Through the peephole, I saw a knot of neighbors in the hall. Elena crying. Milo half awake and frightened. 2 phones up already. Somebody from 11B in slippers and a puffer vest. Thrilled in that nasty late-night way that means adrenaline has mistaken itself for moral concern. I pulled on a robe, disengaged the lock, and opened the door 6 inches with the chain still on. What the hell is wrong with you? John shoved his phone through the gap. So hard it almost clipped my cheek. What's wrong with me? You hit my father with your car. It did not parse. Not at first. My brain treated it like a language I recognized individually but not in sequence. What? He jammed the screen closer. A rear view of a Porsche under streetlights. My plate. Then a photo of Arthur on a stretcher. Blood on the curb. EMTs. The date stamp from less than 3 hours earlier. The hallway inhaled around me. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another said, with immediate ugly satisfaction, "I knew that was her car." John's voice rose. "He's at County General on a ventilator. You ran a red light and left him in the street." I looked at the phone. At him. Back at the phone. "That is my plate," I said slowly. "But I have not left this apartment tonight." John laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only appetite. "Do not do that. Do not stand there and act confused." He pushed harder on the door. Elena stepped forward then with tears pouring down her face. "Please," she said. "Please just help us. They need a surgical deposit before they'll move fast enough. We need 32,000. Please. It's nothing to you." There it was. Not justice. Not call the police. Not come identify the driver. A number. Neat. Immediate. Center stage. My whole body went still. "Get up," I said quietly. "Do not do this on the floor." She had already dropped to her knees. That image would later travel through the building faster than the truth did. Me in the doorway. Elena kneeling. John shaking with grief. The rich woman refusing compassion. That is how mobs work. They take one frame and build a religion from it. John jabbed a finger at my face. "You think because you live upstairs and hide behind money, you don't have to answer for this?" "I am answering," I said. "I'm telling you I didn't drive anywhere." He slapped me so hard my head clipped the doorframe. Someone gasped. No one stepped in. That was the moment I understood the crowd had already chosen structure over truth. They did not want information. They wanted acceleration. I touched the inside of my lip, saw blood on my fingers, and felt something ice over inside me. "Fine," I said. "Call the police." John froze. "So do it," I said louder. "Either you want this handled correctly, or you want money. Choose one." He did not move. So I shut the door in his face, unlatched the chain, opened it fully, and came back with my medical file. I held it up for the whole hall. "I do not drive," I said. "I cannot legally drive." I have severe color vision restrictions on record. I have never been licensed. Not once. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the crowd. Then the worst kind of person spoke up. Oh, so she was driving illegally. The rest latched on immediately, because moral certainty hates vacancy. That makes it worse. No wonder she ran the light. She can't even tell what signal she saw. John grabbed that opening like it was oxygen. Exactly. Thank you. So now we know why. I stared at him. He really thought that worked. He thought if the room stayed hot enough, contradiction would dissolve. I took out my phone and called 911 myself. You should have seen the mood shift. Not toward decency, toward caution. It is one thing to scream when a hallway still feels like theater. It is another when a recording starts, dispatch logs begin, and your voice could later be played back in court to prove that you were a mouth attached to a lie. Officers Medina and Shaw arrived in under 10 minutes. John met them halfway down the corridor, of course already in full righteous son mode. He told them he had seen my Porsche hit Arthur at Fletcher and 9th, that he recognized the plate, that I had come home and hidden upstairs, that I refused to help, that my wealth had made me cold. I gave my statement after him, handed over the medical restriction papers, told them about the assault, told them about the live 6 p.m. call, and said I had not touched the Porsche in weeks. Officer Medina listened the way experienced cops do when they are still undecided. Flat face, patient eyes, not giving anyone the satisfaction of a reaction. Then Greg arrived downstairs in sweatpants and panic, muttering about the security cameras still being out on B1 after the snowstorm. That was the third mistake that mattered. Because coincidence is just opportunity wearing innocent clothes. The whole building went to the garage. My car was still in its spot. At least, that part was true. It was half covered under the fitted gray sheet I keep over it. Greg pulled the cover back. The passenger side front bumper had a fresh scrape in the paint. A dark red-brown smear sat in the broken line like a signature. The garage lost its mind. There. She lied. Oh my God. John actually smiled before he caught himself. Elena started sobbing again. Milo started crying because children know when adults are performing disaster for real, and when they are just very loud. Officer Medina crouched by the bumper, put on gloves, and told everyone to stay back. I said the same thing I had said upstairs. I didn't do this. This time it sounded weaker. Not because I believed it less. Because the evidence had started speaking in a language the room trusted more than me. John pointed so hard his arm shook. What now? What's the excuse now? Excuse. That word hit me harder than the slap. Because once people decide you are guilty, every fact you offer becomes an excuse. Officer Medina asked if the car had a dashcam. Yes, I said. John answered before I could again. Perfect. Show it. We watched it on a maintenance tablet Greg dragged out from the office alcove. At first the footage was just static garage darkness. Then the timestamp rolled to 6:31 p.m. The engine started. The car moved. I felt the bottom drop out of the world. It rolled out of my space, turned through the garage lane, exited the building, went toward Fletcher, blew a red light, hit Arthur Fallon full in the crosswalk, slowed just enough to prove the driver knew something had happened, then sped back toward Mercer and re-entered the garage. It was my car. My plate. My dashcam. Even the angle of the hood line was unmistakable. For a moment, something truly awful happened inside my head. I wondered whether I had lost time. Whether there was some neurological break in me I had never discovered. Whether I had done the impossible and built a new self with better vision and worse morals. That lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then professional instinct fought its way back through the panic. Because the problem with evidence that seems too complete is that it often is. Officer Shaw got the rapid DNA request moving. I called Lila and had her send the recording of my 6 p.m. call. They watched enough of it to confirm I was on camera live while my car was apparently running people over below my building. John adjusted instantly. She pre-recorded it. Officer Shaw shut that down in 2 sentences, but it didn't matter. John wasn't trying to win the officers anymore. He was trying to keep the crowd warm. That mattered because crowds don't need a perfect theory. They just need momentum. When the DNA came back matching Arthur's blood on my bumper, it was enough. Enough for probable cause. Enough for handcuffs. Enough for applause. And now we were back at the patrol car with the video rewinding again. The screen showed the Porsche easing down the garage lane under fluorescent spill. I pointed at the wall beside the lane opening. That's not the resident exit. Medina frowned. What do you mean? I nodded toward Greg. Tell them which ramp that is. Greg squinted. His whole face changed. That's the service ramp, he said. John moved too quickly. So. I didn't look at him. So my parking space is on the resident side. To reach that ramp from my row, the driver had to pass through the maintenance partition and use the loading corridor. Officer Shaw turned to Greg. Can residents do that? No, Greg said slowly. Not unless the rolling gate is opened. We keep that locked. Who can open it? Greg swallowed. Management. Contractors. Temporary service access. Pause it 1 second earlier, I said. Medina did. There, swinging under the steering column as the wheel turned, was a bright orange plastic service tag. Not my keyring. A building access fob. I saw Officer Shaw notice it at the same moment I did. John was already talking too fast. That could be anything. No, Greg said almost to himself. That's one of ours. I turned to him. Who had orange service tags this week? He counted silently, eyes darting. Me. Luis. 2 electricians. He stopped. Officer Medina said. And? Greg looked up. And John. We gave him one during the storm repairs because the loading door keypad was acting up. The silence after that was exquisite. John laughed, but the sound broke in the middle. That proves nothing. No, I said. It proves whoever drove my car used the exact route you were authorized to use. And once the floor shifted, everything else started to move with it. Give me my phone, I said. Medina hesitated, then handed it over. I pulled up my SmartLock app, opened the access history, and scrolled to the previous evening. At 6:07 p.m., my apartment door had been unlocked using the temporary emergency code from the winter pipe burst. Not my phone. Not my face scan. The backup code. The one John had heard when Greg had me on speaker months earlier. Officer Shaw leaned over. Who else knew this? Greg. Maybe Luis. John was physically in my laundry room when I gave it over the phone. John snapped. A lot of people heard that. No, I said. Not a lot. Enough. Then I looked at Greg again. You said the service gate logs entries even if the cameras are out. He nodded, already paling. Pull them. He actually looked at John before he moved. That told me more than I liked. Because it meant Greg had spent the last hour floating in the cowardly middle, hoping reality would choose a side before he had to. He went into the office alcove and logged into the access system. The garage got quiet enough to hear Milo hiccuping from crying too hard. Greg scrolled. Stopped. Scrolled back. Then said without looking up. Service tag 4B opened the B1 partition at 6:18 p.m. and the service ramp gate at 6:19. Same tag re-entered at 6:47. Officer Medina took the tablet from him. Who had 4B? Greg swallowed. John Fallon. This time the silence turned hostile. Not toward me yet. Not even fully toward John. Toward uncertainty itself. Crowds hate having to reverse direction in public. John felt it and started swinging wildly. She could have taken it. When? I asked. While I was on a live video call? You could have given it to somebody. Who? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I moved before he could rebuild. My call recording proves I was in my apartment. My lock log proves someone entered my unit with the emergency code at 6:07. The service access log proves your tag opened the hidden ramp. The video proves the driver used the hidden ramp. And your first move tonight was not police. It was $32,000. Elena made a small sound beside him. He turned on her with his eyes before he turned back to me. Too fast. Too threatening. That was when Officer Medina noticed her hands. They were shaking violently. He shifted his attention to her. "Ma'am, did your husband leave the apartment yesterday evening?" John snapped. "She doesn't know what time." "Mr. Fallon," Medina said sharply, "that question was not for you." Elena looked at Milo, then at the floor, then at John. I could see the whole war in her face. Marriage. Fear. Shame. Habit. Survival. A crowd can smell weakness, but it cannot smell coercion. That is why women like Elena often get mistaken for collaborators, until the first crack gives the truth somewhere to breathe. I softened my voice without meaning to. "Elena," I said, "did he take my car?" John barked. "Don't answer her." Officer Shaw stepped between them. That saved us all about 20 more minutes of lying. Elena started crying again, but not the way she had upstairs. Upstairs had been public crying. This was private crying that got dragged out into light. "I told him not to," she whispered. John's entire face changed. There are certain expressions no decent man should ever direct at the mother of his child in front of strangers. That was one of them. He took a half step toward her. Shaw put a hand flat against his chest and shoved him back. Elena kept going because once truth starts in a room like that, it often comes in broken pieces that only make sense when they finish landing. He said it would be quick. He said he just needed the car because no one would stop a Porsche coming out of Mercer. He said he'd bring it back before anyone noticed. Then he came home shaking and said his dad stepped into the crosswalk too early, and everything was ruined. There it was. No confession from me. No dramatic revelation. Just the ugly ordinary voice of a woman finally too tired to help a lie stand upright. The garage exploded. Not physically. Morally. Neighbors cursing now in a new direction. Greg backing up as if John's disgrace might splash. Someone saying Jesus Christ under their breath. Another whispering I knew something was off, which is what cowards say when the risk has already passed. John tried the oldest trick in the world. He reached for anger because narrative had stopped listening to him. I didn't mean to hit him. The whole garage froze. Because that was not the sentence he thought he had said. He realized it too late. I watched his face understand itself in real time. Then he came apart for real. Not all at once. In waves. He said he needed money. That county had demanded a deposit. That his father's meds, rehab, and home care had already put them under. That he only meant to use my car for one pickup because it would pass through the neighborhood without drawing attention. That he never planned to hurt anyone. That he panicked after the impact. That when he realized whose blood it was, everything in his head went white. That if he could get me to pay fast enough, maybe the hospital crisis would disappear and nobody would ever ask too many questions. He even had the nerve to say, "You could afford it." That was the line that sickened me most. Not because it was irrational. Because it was the clearest thing he said all night. He had not chosen me because I seemed guilty. He had chosen me because I seemed payable. I looked at him and said the only thing worth saying. You hit your own father and still decided money was the main emergency. That landed harder than the handcuffs had. Even Elena flinched. Officer Medina moved then. Fast. He read John his rights while Shaw held him against the patrol car. John kept trying to talk over him, then at him, then through him, as if enough volume could still create an alternate route out of consequence. It couldn't. Milo started crying again. Elena pulled him close and sat down hard on the curb beside the wall, as though her knees had simply declined to continue participating. Officer Medina uncuffed me. The sudden loss of weight on my wrists almost made me stumble. He steadied me automatically, then looked at the split in my lip and asked, "Do you need medical attention?" "I need a minute," I said. That was true in more ways than he knew. Because relief is not the opposite of terror. Not when terror has had time to build furniture inside your body. I stood beside my car while the building slowly reorganized itself around a new truth, and all I could think was how fast they had been willing to lose me. Not abstractly. Not theoretically. Literally. They had watched me get cuffed and applauded. That changes the air in a place. The officers took John. They sent a separate unit to the hospital for follow-up, because now Arthur Fallon was not just a victim. He was the center of a criminal cascade involving reckless injury, false accusation, tampering, unlawful entry, and whatever illegal little pickup John had been trying to use my car for in the first place. Greg promised to secure my unit, replace the broken frame, change the garage access list, and review every lock credential in the building by noon. He said all of it in one breath, the way incompetent men speak when remorse suddenly needs to sound managerial. I nodded and said, "Start with deleting my emergency code." He blanched. Right. Of course. Of course. The neighbors were worse. Apologies began before sunrise. Some in person. Some by text. Some through the building chat, where a handful of people started performing disgust toward John with such intensity, you'd think they hadn't spent the previous hour helping him warm up the gallows. The woman from 10A who had confidently announced upstairs that I must have run the red light, because I couldn't tell the colors apart, caught me near the elevator later that morning and said, "I'm really not normally like that." I looked at her for a long second. You were exactly like that when it counted. She never spoke to me again. Good. Arthur survived. That matters. He had internal bleeding, 2 fractured ribs, a broken pelvis, and a long road back, but he survived. I learned this from Officer Medina 48 hours later, when I gave my formal statement downtown. He also told me the rest of the truth had started to widen. The quick pickup John mentioned had involved debt, 2 burner phones, and a cash handoff connected to a delivery theft scam that had been floating around 3 neighboring buildings for weeks. He had taken my car because he thought it would move invisibly. He had chosen the service ramp because the storm outage gave him a blind corridor. He had used the temporary code because I had left it alive. And when everything collapsed after he hit Arthur, he did what desperate people with entitlement problems often do. He looked for the nearest person whose life already offended him. That was me. A woman alone. Money visible enough to inflame him. A car he could use. A reputation in the building private enough that people would happily fill the silence with whatever ugliness made them feel sharp. I asked Officer Medina something before I left the station. Did you believe I did it? He considered that. Then he gave me the kind of answer only useful people give. I believed enough people around you wanted you to fit the story. That stayed with me more than the cuffs. Because it explained the speed. Not the legal speed. The social speed. The speed with which adults turn suspicion into certainty when certainty flatters their prejudices. At the board meeting 2 weeks later, Mercer tried to behave like an institution recovering from a system's failure instead of a building full of citizens who had nearly helped bury one of their own, because outrage made better small talk than caution. They called it a review of safety protocols and resident escalation concerns. I almost laughed out loud. But I attended, because absence is the favorite raw material of people who need to rewrite shame into misunderstanding. Greg apologized. The board apologized. 3 neighbors apologized. Not one of them apologized for the correct thing. They apologized for being emotional. For getting caught up in the moment. For not knowing all the facts. None of them said, "We were excited to hate you because hating you felt morally satisfying." That would have been too honest. So I said the honest part for all of us. You did not need all the facts, I told them. You only needed me to look like the kind of person you already disliked. No one argued. Because that was the bruise, wasn't it? They did not need me to look guilty. They only needed me to look expensive. I changed the lock. Deleted every old code. Installed a second interior camera facing the entry. Had my attorney send a crisp, unpleasant letter to the building about access liability, emergency code retention, and the legal cost of improvising hallway tribunals with paying residents. Then I did one more thing that surprised even me. I kept the Porsche. For a week after the incident, I considered putting it into long-term dealership storage, or selling it back through an estate broker just to stop looking at it. Not because it had become contaminated in some mystical way, because grief attached to objects can curdle when violence passes through them. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not at the car. At the lesson. At the idea that visible wealth should make me feel guilty enough to shrink. At the way John had used my father's memory, my privacy, my building access, my medical restriction, and my neighbor's resentment to build a case that almost erased me. At the fact that half the building would have slept just fine if I had gone to jail, as long as the story satisfied them first. So I had the car repaired, detailed, returned to its exact spot on B1. Same space, same angle, same ramp in sight. Not because I needed courage, Theodore. Because some lies are best answered by refusing to yield any geography to them. Months passed. Arthur moved into rehab, then to assisted living near his sister after Elena took Milo, and left John for good. I know this because gossip survives anything, even humiliation. John took a plea. He had no choice once Elena agreed to testify. The gate logs lined up, the lock records held, and the financial records on his little side scam started speaking a second language the prosecutor liked even more than the first. I heard he cried in court. I also heard he kept saying he never meant for it to go that far. Men like John love distance language once consequences show up. As if that far were a location they had accidentally driven to and not a path they had actively paved with decisions. Lila started checking in on me more often after that, but in the elegant way only highly competent women know how to do. She never asked, "Are you okay?" That question is too broad and usually serves the asker more than the answerer. Instead, she asked practical things. Do you want all evening calls moved earlier for a while? Do you want building deliveries redirected to the office? Do you want me to update your emergency contact list? One afternoon, about a month later, she drove me downstairs when the dealership returned the Porsche from its final inspection. The damage was gone. Fresh paint on the bumper. New sensor housing. No visible scar. I touched the hood once and thought of my father polishing it in a garage that smelled like wax and solvents and stubbornness. Lila stood beside me and said, "Your dad had ridiculous taste. He had very specific weaknesses." She smiled. Same thing usually. The next morning, I took a town car to work downtown for the first time in weeks instead of staying remote. On the way out, I passed through Mercer's lobby with the Porsche key fob in my hand. 3 neighbors saw it. 2 looked away. 1 gave me a little tight nod, as if mutual recognition might somehow reduce the shame of having applauded my arrest. It did not. I nodded back anyway because indifference is a form of luxury and I could afford it. The last time I saw Officer Medina, he was following up on a package theft ring in the building next door. He stopped me by the front desk, glanced at the key fob, and asked, almost smiling, "Still not driving?" "Absolutely not." "Good," he said. "You're more dangerous when you're watching." I laughed. A real one. Not to calm a room. Not to defuse a threat. Not to make other people comfortable enough to stop inventing me. Just because I wanted to. Then I got into the back of the car waiting outside, and let someone else take the wheel. A good lie can borrow your car. It still can't learn your life.